This is Twisted Passages with award-winning author Marie Sutro. Now, let's take a deep dive into the dark world of psychological thrillers and meet the authors who created them.
Hello, and welcome to Twisted Passages. I'm your host, Marie Sutro, and today we have New York Times bestselling author Marcus Kliewer here to talk about his new release, The Caretaker. Welcome, Marcus.
So nice to be here again.
Oh, it's so exciting to have you back. There's over 100 episodes out of this show, and you are the very first guest that has come back a second time, and I am so excited. I am so excited to chat with you today. But before we start off, can you start listeners off with an overview of what the story's about?
Yeah, so the caretaker follows Macy Mullins, who's a down on her luck college grad that takes on probably the sketchiest house sitting job in the world. But the pay is so good she can't say no, and then comes to realize there might be world-ending stakes at play.
Absolutely amazing setup. And Macy is such a cool, relatable character in every way. She's every one of us as she's going on this job interview. And everybody has been in that situation where you're like, oh, I really need this job. And you set it up with how much would you really need a job like that? And you immediately cross that barrier in horror, which is so hard for people sometimes, which is the believability barrier. But you're so effortless in how you do it because your characters and plots are so relatable.
Yeah, that to me, that's kind of always the central question of any cursed or haunted house story is like, why don't they just leave? And I feel like in this story, I might have actually gone too far in the opposite direction where I've seen people screaming at her because she may or may not leave, which is pretty, it's an interesting problem to have as a writer for sure, because it's not what I'm used to. And of course, it's like the thing I always say for people that like, oh, I wouldn't do that for, oh, that's not enough money. I wouldn't do it. It's like, well, first of all, you must have a pretty nice life. And second of all, I mean, people do way worse things for a lot less money than that. Like, I think you can hire a hitman for less money. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, so, um, sorry, my cat's scratching at the door here like a visitor. Come on.
That's okay for those who have watched on YouTube, and those who haven't, you're going to want to watch on YouTube because Miss Lucy made an amazing cameo in the first few moments of this, and she's adorable. So you mentioned that issue about, maybe you just haven't been in a situation where really you needed that job enough. And I thought underpinning this story with that issue of the haves versus the have-nots and how very different life is for those with privilege and those without. And I was wondering, for you, how much of crafting Lucy came from that position of, gee, if she were a multi-billionaire, she'd be like, see ya. She wouldn't even shown up for the job interview.
Yeah, I think like anybody that's struggled with paying rent or had anxiety after tapping their card, which I still have to this day. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to not have to worry about money as much lately in my life, but like for most of my 20s, it was like every time I tapped a card, it would be like, please go through, please go through. And I still get that anxiety. And so like, what is the saying, money can't buy happiness? It's like, yeah, but it can pay your rent, and it can pay for, if you live in the States, it can pay for heart surgery. So like it can sure as heck buy a lot of things. And yeah, if you, unless you're in that position, it's hard. I can understand how it can be hard for some people to relate, but at the same time, it's like, it's kind of the central thing. It's what our society rotates around for better or worse. And if you're in a position where you might have to get evicted or worse, then you're gonna be put into positions you don't want to be in. That's for sure.
And I was thinking about a lot about these issues because you delve really deep into the psychological elements of what it means to be a human being. And I started to pull the lens back and think about how privilege, it's so easy to see how money can dictate privilege. Macy's going to this neighborhood that is clearly a very privileged neighborhood monetarily. But there's other types of privilege that you get into as well, which is sometimes, especially like when you talk about people who are younger, if you haven't experienced loss in your life, especially like the loss of a loved one or serious health issues for a loved one, there is an innate privilege in that. For those of us who are graced by God not to go through those things at certain points in our lives, it's always coming for you somewhere, and you don't realize you had the privilege till it's gone.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about sitting at not to get too morbid, but yeah, sitting at a close one's deathbed that really kind of changes your perspective on life in a way that I don't really think it's very rarely captured in film or books I've read in a way that felt truthful, which is fair because it's messy and it's scary and it's all these kind of things that maybe you don't want to put in a Disney film kind of thing. But like experiencing it firsthand now a couple times has been, I'm lucky enough to have both my parents still with me, but like I've lost some close family members, and it's pretty all consuming, and it sticks with you. It becomes a part of you. Yeah, it's been super interesting seeing the reaction to, I guess, the character's grief as well, because she's a very angsty and bitter character. But like, I never had to deal with that level of loss at her age. I think she's 22 or so, and to deal with that when you're basically just becoming an adult, you're graduating college, you're taking care of your sister, and then you're just kind of thrust into this position of having to be a caretaker for somebody that you are definitely not equipped for emotionally or mentally. And then on top of that, having to be forced into doing a job and getting everything right in that job. And if you mess up that job, you can get fired, and all this you can have a customer screaming at you for getting their coffee order wrong, and all that kind of stuff. And it can really, really weigh on you. And I hope I captured that with this character. And I think I have for some people. Obviously, not everyone's going to relate to her because everybody's experience with grief is very different, and some people haven't experienced certain types of grief. But yeah, it's just felt honest to who she was. And
I definitely felt that it was honest, and I definitely felt it was relatable the way you wrote it. I was reflecting back on times in my life before I had experienced the type of grief that you're talking about. And I thought, would I have read this or experienced it any differently? In looking back, I feel like your writing in that way is a gift to people, because I had glimpses of it. Again, you can't, certain things you don't know. Chocolate cake, until you've tasted it, you just don't know chocolate cake, right? But you can get ideas. You can get the aroma. You can get, glimpses of it. You can see how moist it is. You can see things about it. And I think that's one of the great things that writers can do for us, is through their own empathy, show us windows to things and maybe make us in a small way more prepared because we know other people have gone through it.
Yeah, I like to think so.
And one of the other things that I absolutely loved, we cannot talk about this book without talking about ritual. You included the idea that in taking on this job as caretaker, there are certain things that you have to do and that Macy has to do in her job. And they don't seem like the biggest things in the world, but there's a repetition to them. They have to happen in a certain order, in a ritualistic style. And I was wondering, I think last time we spoke, you mentioned your history with Christianity. And Christianity is founded upon many different types of rituals in terms of whichever branch of Christianity you practice. And I was wondering how that background for you filtered in, or if it did, or if this was just kind of things you grabbed for that made the story work.
I think it totally, like, my experience with Christianity, and there's been so many positives and so many negatives. And like, I think as with anything, religion is such a complicated thing. And for me, when I was a kid, the verses in the Bible that always fascinated me were ones in the Old Testament, especially around like tabernacle and also just like Revelations. You get dragons and all that kind of stuff, but the ritual around that, and then the idea of, I think it was Uzzah. It was the guy who the ark was falling. The Ark of the Covenant is like falling off of a wagon, and he reaches to grab it and touches it and dies. And then even like Lot, they're leaving the city, and you're not supposed to look back at the city, and if you do, you turn into a pillar of salt. And there's something very just incredibly not to like cheapen them, but very like Lovecraftian and so mythic about that, and just so fascinating, and really inspired my storytelling in a lot of ways. But then it also, for the negative aspect, it inspired like my OCD began as when I was quite younger. It started with religious fear, and so it was constantly being like, oh man, did I do something? Did I sin? Am I going to get into hell? I need to confess. Even though I wasn't Catholic, I really was obsessed with confession. And I mean, that kind of ties into Protestantism a little bit. And so I was constantly like running through my head, what are the bad things I've done? I need to make sure I confess for them, because if I die without doing that, I'm going to go to hell. And it just became, and I didn't even know that was OCD until like decades later. And it was like a constant thing for me, especially when I was like, I want to say 8 to 12 years old. It was just like every single day, it would be like a constant cycle in my head of like running through that. And so it just all just kind of stems out of that. And it's just fascinating to me, the rites and the ritual and the kind of mythic representation of it all, and how every culture kind of has that as well when dealing with, with dealing with the sacred and all that. It's super fascinating.
Yeah, I remember years and years ago when Pope John Paul died. I was listening to some news coverage, and it was something I was listening to in the background, but it stopped me, and I turned around and looked at the TV. I remember this vividly, and the news anchor was talking about, going into conclave, and that when they went in, like they were talking about it, and they said, this is something the Catholics always do well. And I thought, what do you mean the Catholics do well? And I thought about it at the time, and it was that idea of ritual. And rituals cut both ways. In some ways, they're familiar and they give us anchors to hold on to when there is upheaval, like a pope changing for Catholics, right? And there is that sense of familiarity and peace with them. But the other side is very wicked, what you're talking about. It's full of judgment and expectation and can really be crippling. And I just thought, what an absolutely brilliant thing to weave into such an innocuous story as someone being a caretaker for a house.
Yeah, it's fun. For me, like the more innocuous things are, it's a great building point for me, because like I'm always about ratcheting things up. And so starting from something that seems very face value, like a light turning on or off, you can kind of use that as your starting base, which is already inherently kind of eerie, because everybody's had experiences. Even if you don't believe in ghosts, you've had like a weird electricity thing, or like your TV turned on when it shouldn't have. And like, so that's already relatable. And then being able to start from a very grounded level just gives me so much room to just ratchet up the strangeness and the intensity. And it's just more relatable, because I think if I had made the rituals like, oh, at some point the sky's going to open up and the giant alien's going to jump down, very few people have experienced that, if any. So for me, it was like things that people can relate to. Everybody's been in a house or an apartment and somebody's knocked at the door and they're like, who is this person? Is they trying to sell me something? Is it my neighbor? And yeah, and that, to me, just starting in that grounded place makes it more relatable and usually more scary as well.
And I was thinking about that even from a writer's perspective, right? As they always say, it's those five senses that get you into the moment. And as you mentioned, a light switching on or off, there's a sound to that. And then there's the sight aspect of it. And light versus dark. It was just so good.
There's something too, I've said this in other interviews, but there's something I think I'm not the one who invented the light turning on. I saw in like Paranormal Activity. Obviously, it's been in a ton of things, but for me, there's always been something creepier about a light turning on than off, because off is kind of, okay, now the lights are off, the monster's gonna get me. But it's like, why is this light? It's like it almost wants you to see whatever's about to happen. And I think of a line in Stephen King's short story, The Boogeyman, where the creature would, like, at night, it would run its fingers along the banister. And I can't remember the exact wording, but it was like it did it at a volume that it wanted me to hear. Like, it wasn't trying to be too quiet, it wasn't trying to be too loud, just that perfect volume where it's like it wants me to know that it's in the house. And that's just creepy inherently.
It so is, and it makes me laugh because even when you're saying that, I remember some of your scenes where a light came on and I wanted to figuratively take my hands and put them over Macy's eyes so she didn't have to look. So
Yeah.
right. We want that darkness again. We want this almost the safety of the darkness to protect us. So absolutely phenomenal. Now, I have to admit to the audience, you got me so good on the chills and suspense in this book. Could you talk a little bit before I give my reveal about Old House Archives?
Yeah, so there's a subreddit called Old House Archives, and then there's also a website called oldhousearchives.net. The subreddit is kind of where you go to just discuss the books, but then also I have my sibling. I write a bunch of documents, and then my sibling puts them into insane ciphers and codes that even I don't understand, and they post them up on that subreddit, and people kind of work together to decode them. And then once the document's been decoded, it gets uploaded to the .net Old House Archive. And if you like the weird documents and We Used to Live Here, if you like House of Leaves, it's more of that. Although I'm really starting to put a lot more time and effort into it, so there might be things approaching almost more traditional short stories in the future there, but still written as if it's a transcript of, like, describing found footage or somebody's journal entry. So, like, there's weird documents that are going to make no sense and be rambling and convoluted, but then more and more over the months to come, you're going to find more traditional stuff. It's just a fun way for me to keep building the world without having a release all the time. And then also it's just fun for people to, like, find and discover and talk about. So if you love this world and if you want to know more or be even more confused than you already are, go to there and yeah, have at it.
Well, so my reveal to the audience on what a chicken I am. I was so excited, and I knew that was coming, and that was going to be my reward at the end of this amazing book. Was it wasn't going to end. I was going to go to the site and I was going to go enjoy everything because I absolutely adored your first book and I totally adored this book. And I got there and I saw the symbol on the homepage, and it's a symbol from the book. And immediately my little imagination took off with, what if blank, blank, blank happened? And I freaked out and closed it. I couldn't even go do it because you have laid so many seeds in my imagination for what could happen out of these symbols and what they mean and all of these other things that I freaked out even with that. So thank you for getting into my head and living there, Marcus, with your lore. Thank you for that. But yeah, just absolutely amazing. Now, your world that you've been creating isn't just limited to those two places. Your stories are going to be on screen, right?
Yeah, we got Netflix and Universal, and who knows, maybe new stuff with other stories coming out in the future too. So it's pretty surreal. Like, I'm a very private introverted person, so I try to keep my head I try to be like, Hollywood's over there and then I'm over here in my corner writing my books. Give me money and leave me alone, kind of thing. But it's pretty wild to even think about that's happening. Like, if you told me this even 4 years ago, I would have been in complete shock. So, like, it's it's crazy. We'll see. Hollywood's moving along in Hollywood time, but we'll see what happens there. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Well, I am very hopeful because these stories that you write are so amazing and they are so vivid, and you are such a cinematic writer that I can't imagine there's much work to adapt them for the screen, because it is so atmospheric and so wonderful and everything that I'd imagine that they're looking for. So from your very first book, The Success, you have deserved every minute of it, Marcus, and I hope you're enjoying it, because you are bringing so much joy and so much deep thought and consideration to all of us who read your books.
Thank you.
You are welcome, and congrats again on the New York Times bestseller title. That is absolutely wonderful. Now, besides the scary places where people can find about your scary books, if they just want to find out if you're coming to their town or where you're going to be and how they might meet you or connect with you, what's the best way?
Instagram, it's just my name with an underscore in the middle. I'm starting to do stuff on TikTok as well, so there's that. And then just going to simonandschuster.com. I think my author page lists all my upcoming events. And then I also post it on my Instagram. But if you want a more like organized thing with the dates and the times and events, that some events have RSVPs, some don't, some have tickets, some don't. So that's the best way if you want to see me in person.
Well, again, I absolutely love everything that comes out of your brain and cannot wait for anything more. And I'll be definitely out there getting the gumption to go back to the site and trust that things will be okay. It's just in the book that it's scary. A phenomenal read from start to finish. Again, it is called The Caretaker, and it is absolutely fabulous.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcus. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Twisted Passages. We hope to see you next time.